We know where we are today. And we are in a catastrophic situation today because our economy is annihilating life on this planet. Our economy is wrecking the earth.
To be with you here today. My name is Heidi Brault. I have a degree in psychology and I'm a retired library and metadata technician. I'm a volunteer with the First Future Initiative as part of various teams, the COP26 planning team, the library team, the web team, and the executive team. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Peter Carter. Peter is a retired medical doctor, originally from the UK, and has been living in British Columbia, Canada for many years. He's the director of the Climate Emergency Institute, an IPCC expert reviewer, and co-author of Unprecedented Crime, Climate Science Denial, and Game Changers for Survival. Peter presented in panel discussions with Paul Beckwith and Regina Valdez at COP25 in Madrid. And also we have Regina Valdez, who is a climate reality leader and mentor based in New York. She has a master's degree in English literature and is completing a master's in psychology. She is also a Green Faith Fellow and lead Green Associate. Regina participated in panel discussions at COP25 and has conducted interviews and produced videos.
Hi, my name is Charles Gregoire, and I'm a retired electrical engineer and musician, and I'm currently involved in the Future Initiative, as well as this Climate Emergency Forum. And I'm happy to introduce Paul Beckwith, who is a climate system scientist who has taught at the University of Ottawa and Carleton University in the Laboratory of Paleoclimatology. Paul has degrees in engineering and physics and has also studied physics and climatology at the doctoral level. Without a doubt, Paul is one of the most prolific climate change educators on YouTube, with more than 1,000 videos about the bizarre unfolding of climate change. I'm happy to turn it over to Regina, who is our host.
Thank you so much, Charles and Heidi. It's great to see you all again, and thank you for those introductions. So we're going to have a panel discussion today between the three of us regarding what we believe are the most important topics in this climate crisis that we're currently in. And I'd like to start it off with Paul today. Paul?
Yes, thank you, Regina and Charles and Heidi and Peter and everybody. So I like to, I play a lot of chess, and when I look at the climate system, I consider it as sort of, I make parallels to sort of the overall chessboard. So there's individual squares, individual spaces, different parts of the earth, whether it be continental or coastal or polar or high elevation. So I look at all of the different spatial components and then look at the temporal components to see how things are changing over time, how they were in the past, what's happening now, in order to connect these dots and try to figure out what's going to happen in the future, whether it be in the near term future or in the further term future. So, you know, obviously climate change is accelerating and things are always happening faster than expected. I think that's a phrase that we're always hearing, and, you know, unprecedented change, things happening faster than expected. And the overall Earth climate system is very, very rapidly changing, and the manifestation of that is no greater. The change is most significant in the Arctic. So the Arctic is warming. We're losing the snow and ice. So the Arctic is becoming a much darker place. It's reflecting less solar energy. So it's warming extremely fast as we lose the sea ice and as we lose snow cover on the land and as we lose glaciers. Because of the huge temperature rise in the Arctic, which is 4 to 5 to 8 times faster than the rest of the planet and the global average, depending on how high in latitude you are, the Arctic, the temperature difference to the equator is greatly reduced. So the jet streams are slowing down and becoming wavier and becoming stuck in place. And as we lose Arctic sea ice, the center of cold in the Arctic will switch from near the pole, North Pole, to be centered over Greenland. Because the jet streams are much wavier and slower and disrupted, we're getting extreme weather events around the planet. Some regions are getting torrential rains leading to massive flooding. Other regions are getting drought, and these are persistent patterns. So the whole system is rapidly changing, and that will very soon affect the global food supply. It's already happening, but when we get simultaneous crop failures around the planet, then we'll get mayhem. We'll have climate mayhem breaking out. So in a nutshell, the whole system is sort of rewiring, if you like, or changing, and we have to figure out ways to deal with this and try to slow it down and stop it, in fact.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate your sanguine approach, and I certainly hope that it's something that we can effectuate in the future. And you had mentioned sea ice loss, and it's kind of related to something that I wanted to talk about, something that's near and dear to my heart. And one of those things that keeps me up at night is water scarcity. It's something that we all need water. Without water, we cease to be. Not just humanity, but all living beings on the face of the planet. So I take this quote, "Water, water everywhere, not any a drop to drink," from a famous poet who had a very negative view of life, and through a spiritual awakening began to have a feeling of hope. And that's, I hope, something that we can engender and make happen in our lives during our lifetime, although I have to say I'm not quite sure. One of the things that I wanted to share is that we have water, we're a water planet, but only 2% of the water on our planet is potable. What does that mean? That means of all of this vast water that we see everywhere. I'm next to the Hudson River. It's beautiful. I look at it every day, and I'm so grateful to be near that great, storied, hallowed river. But only 2% of the water is potable. And the population is increasing, but this amount of water is not increasing. So, and I want to say that this is not a surprise. As a matter of fact, as early as 1957, and I'd be willing to bet even before that, we knew that water was going to be the next coming crisis. So, you know, this article that I found, it's just like a teeny tiny little article that one could easily miss. It was buried on the front page of the Times in 1957. And I saw not too long ago, perhaps a year or so ago, an article in the Times saying that water might be a great investment to make because there's so little of it to go around. I found that to be a bit cynical at best. And we're currently seeing water shortages all around the world. This is an image of South Africa a few years ago. You may remember they were speaking to day zero. What did day zero mean? It meant when the entire country would be out of water. It's a frightening concept, but it's not one that's singular only to South Africa. India is also having a great deal of problems with water. Just a year ago, Chennai, India, a city with millions of people, was just on the brink also of day zero. We've also seen day zero warnings coming from Mexico City, again, a city of millions and millions of people. unless you think that this is a problem that only affects what we refer to as third world countries, please don't kid yourself. California, which is currently hailed as the world's 5th largest economy, has been in drought for decades. Many Californians, in fact, are suffering from water scarcity and water insecurity. There's many Californians who can't even bathe in their water because of the agricultural runoff, making this water toxic to their skin, to their being. So it's a thing that we're going to have to deal with more and more, and it's with frightening proportions. And I just want to close by saying thank you, Paul, for speaking to glacial ice melt. And we just saw a few days ago at the Himalayas an explosion, a glacier exploding, and water expelled from that. And as more of these glaciers melt, explode, water is released into the atmosphere. What people don't realize is water vapor is a very potent greenhouse gas. And what does that equate to? A gradually more warming world. We're talking feedback loops that have dire consequences. And I know that Peter is going to speak to the consequence of these positive feedback loops and the consequences that they have for us. So Peter, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks for the introduction by Heidi and Charles, and it's a great pleasure to be back in our team, which did a number of really successful presentations at the last conference of the parties, UN in Madrid. Paul, thank you very much for naming the correct issue that we're looking at. Very few scientists do name it. It's not only a climate emergency, it's a climate system emergency. And that's a crucial difference because the climate system takes in every system in the biosphere, takes in the whole planet, including the mountains and rocks, which are crucial parts of the long-term climate system. The issue that we're looking at is also poorly communicated. The issue is pollution. And when we look at the main source of greenhouse gas pollution, fossil fuels, that includes air pollution. I'm used to looking at these kind of situations as environmental health issues, and that's completely different actually to how climate change is assessed by the IPCC, although the IPCC does tremendous work. And in fact, the 2018 IPCC 1.5 degrees C report was very largely what led to a general awareness, finally, from my point of view, of the climate emergency. So we have increasing numbers of municipalities and countries even, and other jurisdictions still acknowledging the climate emergency. Now that is a great thing. That is a giant leap forward from the point of view of dealing with the climate system emergency. Paul and Regina mentioned what is the very worst. Well, actually, they mentioned two of the very worst impacts, which are inevitable impacts of global climate disruption. One is to just humanity, to the human race itself, and that's impacts on agriculture. We've known for years and years and years there are multiple adverse impacts of climate disruption on agriculture. And these impacts are adverse. There are a couple of beneficial impacts, but they rapidly disappear as the rate of global surface temperature increases. Yes, we're getting more water, of course, because the warmer surface holds a lot more water vapor. So one of the great ironies here is that we're actually getting more and more water in the climate system, but it doesn't help. A very large percentage of this extra water is dropping over the oceans. That's not particularly helpful for us. And a lot of it is dropping over the poles, and for a particular reason of feedbacks, that's not helpful either. The drier regions of the planet, the scientists have always projected we're going to get drier. Desertification is going to increase, and water itself is just as damaging to agriculture, and particularly the agricultural land, as drying and drought. And the United States has seen both. Regina's also already mentioned the drought. The projections now is that the southwest, the whole southwest corner, and even Pacific going right up to Canada, is now entering a period of mega drought. So this is a permanent drought, which is only going to get worse. And on the eastern part of the United States, the agriculture has already been devastated by these unbelievable amounts of precipitation, amounts of rainfall, and flooding, and severe damaging waterlogging of the land.
Thank you so much, Peter, and also thank you so much, Paul. Things that both of you said that connected for me. Peter, you spoke to the drying of the West, which we've certainly seen, and it's led to tremendous wildfires. I mean, the wildfire season in California, I mean, last year alone was unprecedented. And then Paul, you had spoken to I think you had said the wobbly, whatever the wobbly thing is. And I'm wondering if,
yep.
Yes, and I'm wondering if the two things, and of course there's a feedback with all of these forests burning of emitting carbon into the air, another feedback.
Yes, they're all connected, and that this is why, you know, I think we're a world of specialists. We're a world of people, you know, like in the scientific community, people study a very small niche and become experts, say, on one particular glacier, or on, you know, one molecule in the atmosphere, or, you know, one small feature. And scientists are reticent to talk too much about the overall system and how the pieces connect together. They're very comfortable talking about their own one narrow area of research, but more and more people, more and more of the science community is starting to move outward and talk about the overall system, because of the great concern, you know, for what's happening. And, you know, also, you know, when we use the phrase faster than expected, that really, really means, when you think about it, that our expectations, our knowledge is lacking and insufficient, right? When there's always constant surprises, some of them, you know, will be impossible to predict, but lots of them, if you actually think about overall system change, you can actually figure out the patterns, you know, and what is going to happen. And, you know, I'm very concerned too about the rate of change is much, much faster now than it has been in the paleo records throughout history, human history, maybe 30, 40 times faster, in fact. And, you know, in 2020, the numbers for global average temperature rise were given about, relative to pre-industrial, were given as 1.25 degrees Celsius, and then it was compared to 1.5. People are saying, well, we'll pass 1.5 in a decade or so. But those numbers are a bit misleading, because when we came up with the 1.5 degree guard band, temperature safe guard band, or 2 degrees Celsius that is talked about in all these climate conferences, those were originally set relative to the year 1750. Not, okay, so the 1.25 degrees Celsius global average temperature, that's above the turn of the last century. So that's relative to an average between the year 1880 and 1910. So in order to compare apples to apples, we need to correct for that baseline shift and take it back to 1750. And from 1750 to the 1900 timeframe, the temperature already went up 0.3 degrees Celsius. So that 1.25 is actually 1.55 relative to the year 1750 pre-industrial. So we've already passed the 1.5 degrees Celsius band. Now, if you look at the 10-year average, the last 10 years, we're at 1.35. Okay, so we're not, you know, for a year we passed 1.5. for a given month, I think a couple months have actually had average temperatures about 1.85 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial. So we're approaching that 2-degree number very, very rapidly. And I would argue we've already passed the 1.5. It's not a matter of a decade from now. So, this is a very, very concerning, and there needs to be more and more people that talk about that. So always keep in mind, the baseline when we're talking about things and the time scale that things are happening, because the warming and the increase of CO2 and the increase of ocean temperatures and the increase of extreme weather events, all of these things are heading up really exponentially, much, much faster than any expectation. So we really need strong action. I'm encouraged by Biden and some of his action. I'm encouraged about, there's lots of talk about slashing fossil fuels. There's lots of people talking about removing carbon dioxide and methane from the atmosphere, and also for using technologies to perhaps cool the planet and things like that. So lots of different ideas, but we really need strong action. We've lost our, we're hanging over a cliff by our fingernails, and we have to try to pull ourselves back to a stable climate.
Thank you for that. One thing that struck me, for one thing, when you spoke about the 1.85, I think it is important to point out that that's the global average, meaning there are places on the planet that have already surpassed that by far. But even before we get to catastrophic, well, I would argue that we are in a catastrophic phase, but before it comes to the Western world, I think what's important to point out is the global instability that will come from the inequality that we're seeing. For example, the selling of water to wealthy people in South Africa, major industries having more of the natural resources than actual people. And this certainly is not going to set well, and it's going to destabilize much of what we call the stable world. And I'm wondering, Peter, if you have anything to speak to in terms of that.
Well, yeah, we've known it's been predicted forever that as climate disruption increases, conflict at all levels will increase. And from the point of view of security, the world will become an increasingly insecure place to live, insecure planet. Ironically, the institution that seems to recognize that better than anybody else is the intelligence and defense departments of countries like the United States. I do agree, Regina, that we are today in a climate, earth, human catastrophe situation. After all, we are in a massive extinction event, right? I recall that Peter Raven of the United States, when the last rate of extinctions was estimated, it's happening at 1,000 times the normal rate of extinction, the normal slow rate of extinction. The World Wildlife Fund for Nature, every year, as long as I can remember, they put out what they call a living planet index. And those graphs are all down. They're all headed downwards. They're heading downwards fast. And the last one, which was this year, they estimated that we've lost 68% of the life of species over the past 50 years. This is already like a massive asteroid hitting the planet. That's what it's like. If you look at these changes, which Paul has mentioned over geological times, but even over the time of our evolution, this is a sudden, massive, abrupt change to planet Earth. We are now living on a planet which has been so severely and fundamentally changed. Not only the chemistry of the atmosphere, the chemistry of the oceans, the desertification, the deforestation, it has been so changed that this is not a planet that Paul and I were born into, for instance. And this is not a planet that humans have ever lived on and that humans evolved in. It is radically and disastrously different. It has been severely degraded. And this degrading of planet Earth and the annihilation, indeed, quoting a recent paper, annihilation of the biology of the planet and vertebrate species of which we are one. And this was a Stanford study just a few years ago. This annihilation, of course, is accelerating. And climate change is just now starting to punch that annihilation of life faster. And again, the scientists have told us decades ago that in a few decades, right now, of course, we all know very well what the annihilation is due to. It's due to deforestation and also widespread degradation of the land by industrial agriculture. And that involves chemicals, nitrogen fertilizer, that involves pesticides. Paul and I are very well aware that almost now on a daily basis, we're getting these terrible, tragically sad reports from the scientists of what's happening. And what's happening is it's not humanity, okay? It's not the human race. This has just been happening for a couple of 100 years. This is our insane economy and our insane consumer heavy-duty manufacturing economy, which is a massively polluting economy, as well as a massively degrading, destructive economy. So this is why greenhouse gas pollution is the problem. The problem is pollution. And we know how to deal with pollution. You change all your goods and services processes so that you don't pollute. And we can do this. We can readily do this. I just want to mention that, just reinforce the fact that I follow the data. This is what I do. I'm not a climate expert modeler, and I follow the data and I post it on a monthly basis and I put it together. Now, and just this year, acknowledged by published papers by all the scientists, every single one of what we call the climate indicators is not only at record high, it's accelerating. It's accelerating, every one. We do not need to be doing model projections of the future anymore. We know where we are today, and we are in a catastrophic situation today because our economy is annihilating life on this planet. Our economy is wrecking the earth. And we're leaving a terrible legacy, which is inevitable. And we should darn well be looking at it for all today's children in the world and all future generations. So yeah, that's what we should be looking at. And I totally agree with Paul. We gotta look at these things. And our group here is, science is gone and become a little bit odd, it's all modeling and reductionist, and I just concentrate on this little thing, so don't ask me what really is happening to the planet. So I enjoyed very much working with our partners here and other people, and when we went to Madrid, because we have to look at this as in an intelligent manner. And an intelligent manner means a caring manner. It means a responsible manner. This is what intelligence is, after all. And it's a great cooperative thing which human beings can do. We can start doing this any year.
Thank you so much for that, Peter. And thank you for bringing up the extraction economy. Not to go back but to go back to it and use it as a metaphor, the extraction of groundwater for our water supplies it mirrors how we view what's important. And what seems to be important is the right here, the right now. What can I get? How can I get it? Consequences be damned. You know, places in California, places in India, places in Africa are so depleted of groundwater that they are now sinking. It's a frightening thing that we're facing. You know, thousands of children die every day because they do not have access to clean water. And of course, we know that insects and animals are suffering the same fate as children. And as you said, Peter, it's like an asteroid hitting the planet. Maybe it's like an asteroid hitting the planet over and over again. But the thing that makes this so monstrous is it's not happenstance. It's not an accident. We know what we're doing and we're continuing to do it. So do either of you have any closing quick thoughts on what to do in terms of this extraction economy?
I'd like to, I like the anecdote that, you know, if we eventually come up with an artificial intelligence, sort of a HAL 2000 or whatever, supercomputer, you know, that can solve problems, you know, we ask it, how do we solve what do we do about the climate crisis, the climate emergency? And the best response, the first response it'll come up with is get rid of the humans. Right? Well, that's not an acceptable response to us and, you know, our people in our group and many other people around the world. So we're trying, you know, but the first step to solving a problem is you have to understand the scope of the problem, the magnitude of the problem. You know, it's obviously affecting the entire planet and it's getting worse and worse in time. So we can't just change light bulbs, right? We have to understand the scope of the problem and then apply emergency responses to do what we can, not knowing the outcome, whether it'll be successful or not. That's not the issue, right? We have to do what we can to ensure that we can survive on this planet, really. And not just us, but the biosphere. I mean, you know, a thing that really sticks to mind too is, you know, if you look at all the birds on the planet, look at the mass of all the birds on the planet, for example, you know, the mass of chickens for, you know, for our consumption, egg laying and meat, you know, exceeds the mass of every other bird species in nature on the planet. You know, and if you look at the mass of humans and the mass of livestock, right, that far exceeds the mass of all other living things on the planet. You know, I'm not talking about trees, animals, I guess. So yeah, we have, you know, it's a complex problem and we're not going to solve it overnight, but we need to reverse what's happening. You know, and when I see, you know, in technology, you know, it's always double-edged. I mean, when you see something like Bitcoin, right, the energy consumption of Bitcoin exceeds that of many, many countries just for that one digital currency, right? So is it like we just do things and then we don't look at the effects that they'll have on us and the planet. We just do them. So we need to change our paradigm, change our way of thinking, big time. Yeah.
Thank you. That's what I got from both of you, the importance of moving away from this extraction economy, changing the way we view our planet and our values. So I want to thank you all for coming together today. This was a very important topic and I appreciate hearing what you had to share on it. It's very informative. Thank you.
Thank you. Great pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.